My grandma chose the cheating brother over my dad after he got my mom pregnant. 20 years later, she's begging my dad to save her from the nursing home while we live in the mansion she was forced to sell. My grandmother is in a nursing home begging my father to get her out. My father is in her mansion eating dinner at her table. He bought it at auction for $412,000 after she lost everything backing the son who destroyed our family. I'm 23. My name is Landon Calloway. Let me tell you how my father went from the son my grandmother threw away to the man holding the keys to her house while she rots in a facility that smells like bleach and regret. My dad is Donovan Calloway. 51. Architect. Owns his own firm. Built it from a folding table in a one-bedroom apartment when I was 4 years old. Before that he was a junior draftsman making $38,000 a year and raising me alone because my mother left before I could walk. My mother left because of my uncle. My uncle Garrett is my dad's younger brother. 2 years younger. The favorite. Always the favorite. Grandma Vivian made that clear from the day Dad could understand favoritism. Garrett got the car at 16. Dad got the bus. Garrett got college paid for. Dad got loans. Garrett got the front bedroom. Dad got the converted garage. When Dad was 27 he married my mother, Paige. Small wedding. Grandma Vivian didn't come. She was helping Garrett move into a new apartment that weekend. Couldn't reschedule her own son's wedding. Dad and Paige had me a year later. I was 3 months old when Dad found out Paige had been sleeping with Garrett for the last 5 months of the pregnancy. The baby was his. I was his. Confirmed by a DNA test. Dad paid $380 for when I was 6 weeks old because something felt wrong and he couldn't explain what. I was Donovan's. But the doubt almost killed him. Because Paige was with Garrett in the same month she was pregnant with me. Same house. Same bed. While Dad was at work drafting blueprints for other people's homes. Dad confronted Paige. She admitted everything. Said she and Garrett were in love. Said she was sorry but she couldn't help it. Said Dad was stable but boring and Garrett made her feel alive. Dad told Grandma Vivian. Drove to her house. The mansion. 4,200 square feet. Built in 1979 by my grandfather Harold Calloway who died when I was a baby. Grandma Vivian inherited everything. The house. The investments. A portfolio worth $1.2 million at the time. Dad sat in her kitchen. The kitchen with the marble island that Harold installed himself. He told her everything. Paige. Garrett. 5 months. The DNA test. Grandma Vivian listened. Then she said, Donovan. I need you to hear me. Garrett told me his version last week. Last week. She'd known for a week and said nothing. Dad said, he told you he was sleeping with my wife and you didn't call me? She said, I wanted to hear both sides. Dad said, both sides of what? He slept with my wife for 5 months. She said, Paige says you were distant. Working too much. Neglecting her. She felt lonely. Dad said, I was working to support my family. My wife. My son. In a house I could barely afford. She said, I'm not excusing what Garrett did. But Paige is unhappy. Garrett makes her happy. Sometimes these things happen for a reason. Dad stood up. He said, you're taking his side. She said, I'm not taking sides. I'm saying that Garrett is finally in love. Really in love. For the first time. He's different with Paige. Softer. More focused. She's good for him. Maybe this is what he needed. Dad said, what about what I need? My wife cheated on me with my brother. I have a 3-month-old son. What about us? She said, you'll be fine, Donovan. You've always been fine. You're the strong one. You don't need me the way Garrett does. Dad left. Drove home. Packed my diaper bag. Put me in the car seat. Drove to his friend Mitch's house. Stayed there for 2 weeks. He filed for divorce 3 days later. Paige didn't contest. She wanted out. Wanted Garrett. Wanted the version of life that felt exciting instead of responsible. Custody was simple. Paige signed over full custody without a fight. Her lawyer called Dad's lawyer, a woman named Avery Chen, and said, my client isn't contesting custody. She's not requesting visitation at this time. Avery told Dad. He said, she doesn't want to see her own son? Avery said, she didn't say that. She said she's not requesting visitation at this time. Dad said, that means the same thing. Avery said, yes. It does. The divorce was final in 9 weeks. Dad got full custody of me. Paige got nothing because she asked for nothing. She moved in with Garrett the same week the papers were signed. Grandma Vivian hosted Thanksgiving that year. She invited Garrett and Paige. She did not invite Dad. Dad found out from his cousin Leon who called and said, I just got the invite. Your mom's doing Thanksgiving at the mansion. Garrett and Paige are on the list. You're not. I'm not going. Just thought you should know. Dad called Vivian. He said, you invited Garrett and Paige to Thanksgiving and not me. She said, I thought it would be easier if you had your own Thanksgiving. Less tension. He said, less tension for who? For Garrett? She said, for everyone. You're still angry. It would ruin the dinner. He said, my anger would ruin dinner, but the man who slept with my wife gets a seat at the table? She said, Donovan, I love you. But I can't keep punishing Garrett for a mistake. He's happy. Paige is happy. The baby. Dad stopped. He said, what baby? Silence. She said, Paige is pregnant. Garrett's. They found out last month. Dad hung up. He didn't call Vivian again for 6 years. Those 6 years are when Dad built everything. I was there for all of it. Not because I understood at the time. Because I was literally there. In the office. On the floor. Playing with blocks while he drafted at a folding table in our one-bedroom apartment at 11 p.m. because he'd been at his day job until 6, picked me up from daycare at 6:30, fed me, bathed me, put me to bed, then worked on his own projects until 2 a.m. He got his architecture license when I was 3. Opened his firm when I was 4. First client was a kitchen remodel. $8,500. He designed it on that folding table and supervised the build on weekends with me strapped to his back in a carrier. Second client. Third. Fifth. By the time I was 7, Dad had an office. By the time I was 10, he had 4 employees. By 15, he had 11 employees and a client list that included 2 commercial developers and a hospital renovation. He never asked Vivian for money. Never asked Garrett for anything. Never asked Paige for child support even though Avery told him he could. He said, I don't want her money. I don't want anything connecting my son to the people who abandoned him. I grew up knowing 2 things. My dad loved me more than anything on earth. And my grandmother chose my uncle over us. I met Garrett once when I was 9. A family event on Leon's side. Garrett showed up with Paige and their daughter Hazel. Hazel was 8. My half-cousin, technically. Also my half-sister biologically because Paige was my mother. Garrett walked up to Dad. Tried to shake his hand. Dad looked at the hand. Then at Garrett's face. Then walked away. Garrett called after him. Come on, Donovan. It's been 9 years. We're family. Dad turned around. He said, you slept with my wife. She abandoned my son. And our mother chose you over us. We are not family. Stay away from me and stay away from Landon. Garrett said, he's Paige's son too. Dad said, Paige signed away custody. She hasn't called in 9 years. She doesn't get to claim him through you. I watched that exchange from across the room. I was 9. I understood more than Dad thought I did. I understood that the man trying to shake my father's hand was the reason I didn't have a mother. When I was 12, Grandma Vivian's financial trouble started. Garrett had been living off Vivian for years. She'd been funding his lifestyle. $3,000 a month in direct payments. Co-signed a $45,000 car loan he stopped paying. Put a second mortgage on the mansion to cover his debts. $180,000. At 7.2% interest because her credit was already damaged from the car loan default. Garrett's businesses failed. 3 of them. A restaurant that lasted 14 months. A landscaping company that lasted 8. A fitness studio that never opened. Each one funded by Vivian. Each one a hole she poured money into because Garrett was the favorite and favorites don't face consequences. By the time I was 14, the mansion had a third mortgage. $340,000 total in liens against a property appraised at $520,000. Vivian was 74. Fixed income. Social Security and Harold's pension. $3,200 a month. The mortgage payments alone were $2,800. She called Dad when I was 14. First time in 6 years. She said, Donovan. I need help. I'm losing the house. Dad said, how much do you owe? She said, $340,000. Garrett's businesses. I was trying to help him. Dad said, you mortgaged Dad's house for Garrett's failed businesses? She said, he said they'd pay off. He promised. Dad said, Garrett has promised a lot of things. To you. To me. To my wife. She said, I know. I know I made mistakes. But I need $340,000 or the bank is going to take the house. Can you help me? Dad said, no. She said, Donovan. Please. This is your father's house. He built it. Dad said, Dad built that house for the family. You used it as collateral for the son who destroys everything he touches. I'm not paying for that. She said, I'm your mother. Dad said, you chose Garrett. Let Garrett save the house. She said, Garrett doesn't have any money. He's. Dad said, happy? Isn't that what you told me? He's happy? Let his happiness pay the mortgage. He hung up. The bank foreclosed when I was 16. The mansion went to auction. 4,200 square feet. Marble kitchen. Harold's built-in bookshelves. The front porch with the stone columns. Dad bought it. $412,000. Cash. From his firm's success. He'd been watching the foreclosure proceedings through Avery for 18 months. Waiting. Planning. He didn't tell Vivian. Didn't tell Garrett. Didn't tell anyone except Avery and me. I was 16 when he sat me down and said, "Landon. Grandpa Harold built that house. Your grandmother lost it because she spent everything on Garrett. I bought it back. We're moving in." I said, "Does she know?" He said, "She'll find out." She found out when the county records updated and a neighbor called her. Vivian was living in a small apartment by then. 2 rooms. $900 a month. She called Dad. She said, "You bought my house?" He said, "I bought Dad's house. The one you mortgaged for Garrett's restaurant. And his landscaping company. And his fitness studio that never opened." She said, "How could you do this? That's my home." He said, "It was your home. You lost it. I bought it. Those are different things." She said, "You're rubbing it in. This is revenge." He said, "This isn't revenge. This is me protecting my father's legacy from the woman who was willing to sell it for her favorite son's pipe dreams. Harold built that house. I'm going to make sure it survives." She said, "I want to come see it. I want to see my home." He said, "It's not your home anymore. It's mine. And my son's. If you want to visit, you can call Avery and request a time." She didn't call Avery. She called Garrett. Garrett called Dad. First time in 7 years. He said, "What the hell, Donovan? You bought Mom's house?" Dad said, "I bought the house our father built that our mother mortgaged to pay for your failures." "Yes." Garrett said, "You're trying to punish her." Dad said, "I'm trying to protect Harold's house. Something you and Mom should have done instead of borrowing against it 3 times. Garrett said, "This is messed up. She's 76 years old. You're taking her house." Dad said, "The bank took her house. I bought it from the bank. If you want to be angry at someone, be angry at yourself. Your businesses. Your debts. Your inability to build anything that lasts. That's why she lost the house. Not me." Garrett hung up. We moved in that summer. Dad spent $95,000 renovating. New kitchen. New bathrooms. But he kept the bones. Harold's bookshelves. The original floors. The stone porch columns. The fireplace mantel Harold carved by hand in 1981. I got the bedroom Dad grew up in. The converted garage was now a proper room with windows and insulation. Dad made sure of that. He said, "Nobody in this house sleeps in a garage ever again." That line hit me harder than he intended. I was 17 when Paige called. Not Dad. Me. She found my number through Hazel, who'd found me on social media. Hazel was 16 and curious about her half-brother. Paige said, "Landon. It's your mother." I said, "I don't have a mother. I have a father. What do you want?" She said, "I want to know you. I made a terrible mistake leaving. I was young and stupid and I let Garrett convince me that." I said, "Don't blame Garrett. You signed the custody papers. Nobody made you do that. You chose to leave a 3-month-old baby because your husband's brother was more exciting than your husband. That was your choice." She was quiet for a long time. She said, "You sound just like Donovan." I said, "Thank you." She said, "Can we meet? Just coffee. I just want to see you." I said, "No. Don't call again." I told Dad. He didn't say anything. Just nodded. Then went to his office and worked for 6 hours straight. When I was 19, Vivian's health collapsed. Diabetes. Heart condition. 2 falls in 3 months. She couldn't live alone anymore. The apartment wasn't equipped for her needs. Garrett was supposed to handle it. He was the favorite. The one she sacrificed everything for. The one who got the money and the attention and the Thanksgiving invitations. Garrett put her in a nursing home. Pine Valley Care Center. $6,800 a month. He signed the intake papers and told the staff his mother had resources. She didn't. Her Social Security and Harold's pension combined was $3,200. Half the monthly cost. Garrett said he'd cover the rest. He covered it for 4 months. Then stopped. Because Garrett doesn't finish anything. The nursing home called Vivian's emergency contacts. Garrett didn't answer. Paige didn't answer. The third contact on the list was Dad. Dad's phone rang on a Tuesday evening. We were eating dinner in the mansion. At the Marble Island Harold installed. Dad answered. Listened. He said, "I'm not her financial contact. Her son Garrett Calloway signed the intake documents." The facility said, "Mr. Garrett Calloway is not responding. Mrs. Calloway is 4 months behind. $27,200. If the balance isn't resolved, she'll need to be transferred to a state facility." Dad said, "I understand. I'll have my attorney review the documents." He called Avery the next morning. She pulled the intake paperwork. Garrett had listed himself as responsible party but had stopped paying after month 4. The facility had been sending notices to Garrett's address. All returned. Avery said, "Garrett moved. No forwarding address. He's been dodging the facility and his mother's care bills." Dad said, "So he put her in a home, promised to pay, then disappeared." Avery said, "That's what the paperwork shows." Dad said, "Classic Garrett." Avery said, "What do you want to do?" Dad said, "Nothing. She's not my responsibility." Garrett signed the papers. Garrett owes the money. If the facility needs to pursue someone, they pursue Garrett. Avery said, "She'll be transferred to a state facility. Those are not pleasant places." Dad was quiet for a long time. I was in the kitchen. I could hear the silence through the phone. He said, "I know." Vivian called Dad 3 days later. She'd gotten his number from the facility. She was crying. Not the controlled crying of someone making a point. The real crying of an 80-year-old woman who just found out her favorite son abandoned her. She said, "Donovan. Garrett stopped paying. They're going to move me to a state home. Please. I'm begging you. Help me." Dad said, "Where's Garrett?" She said, "I don't know. He changed his number. Paige says he moved to Florida. He just left. Left me here." Dad said, "He left you the way he leaves everything. The way he left his businesses. His debts. His responsibilities. You spent 30 years funding that pattern. This is where it ends." She said, "I know I chose wrong. I know I should have chosen you. I know I destroyed our family by taking his side. But I'm 80 years old and I'm scared and I'm alone and the son I chose isn't here." Dad closed his eyes. I saw it. Standing in Harold's kitchen. The kitchen with the marble island. In the house she lost because of the son she chose. He said, "Mom. I'm going to ask you one question. And I need you to answer honestly." She said, "Anything." He said, "If Garrett hadn't disappeared. If he was still paying. If he was still showing up. Would you be calling me right now?" Silence. She said, "Donovan." He said, "Answer the question." More silence. She said, "I don't know." Dad said, "That's the most honest thing you've said to me in 20 years. You don't know if you'd call me even now unless Garrett failed you. I'm still the backup. After everything. After 20 years. I'm still the son you call when the favorite doesn't show up." She was sobbing. Dad said, "I'm not going to let you suffer. I'll talk to Avery. We'll figure out the bills. But I need you to understand something. I'm not doing this because you deserve it. I'm doing this because Harold would want me to. Because he raised me to be the kind of man who takes care of people even when they don't take care of him. You didn't teach me that. He did. In this house. The one you lost." He hung up. Sat at the kitchen island for 20 minutes without moving. Then he called Avery. He said, "Set up a payment plan for the nursing home. I'll cover the difference between what her income pays and what the facility charges. But the payments come from a trust. Not from me personally. She doesn't get to claim I'm supporting her. And Garrett doesn't get to feel absolved." Avery said, "I'll draft it. You know this could be $3,600 a month for years." Dad said, "I know. Harold would have paid it without thinking. I'll think about it every month. But I'll pay it." Vivian has been at Pine Valley for 14 months now. Dad pays $3,600 a month. $50,400 so far. She knows the money comes from a trust. She doesn't know the trust is funded by the man she chose last. Garrett has not called her in 11 months. Has not visited. Has not sent money. Has not sent a card. The favorite son chose himself exactly the way his mother taught him to. He learned from the best. Paige sends Vivian photos of Hazel occasionally. That's her entire contribution. Photos of the granddaughter Vivian chose over the grandson she abandoned. Last month I visited Vivian. First time. Dad didn't ask me to. Didn't stop me either. He said, "That's your choice. I won't influence it." I walked into Pine Valley. Found her room. Small. Clean enough. A window facing a parking lot. She was sitting in a chair watching TV with the volume too loud. She looked at me. Didn't recognize me at first. Then her face changed. She said, "Landon?" I said, "Hi, Grandma." She started crying immediately. She said, "You're so tall. You look just like Donovan. Same jaw. Same eyes." I said, "I know." She said, "I'm sorry. For everything. For choosing Garrett. For missing your childhood. For not being there." I said, "I know you're sorry now. But I need to ask you the same question Dad asked. If Garrett was still here, still paying, still showing up, would you have wanted to see me?" She looked at her hands. Folded in her lap. Thin. Spotted. She said, "I want to say yes." I said, "But?" She said, "But I don't know. And I hate that I don't know. I hate that after 80 years I still can't say for certain that I would have chosen differently." I said, "That's the most honest thing you've said to me in 23 years. Dad said the same thing when you told him on the phone." She said, "Donovan is a good man. Better than I deserved. Better than any of us deserved." I said, "He pays $3,600 a month to keep you here. He eats dinner every night at Grandpa Harold's kitchen island. In the house you lost. He's raising me in the bedroom he grew up in. The one you gave him that used to be a garage. He turned it into a real room. With windows. She put her hand over her mouth. He said nobody in his house sleeps in a garage ever again. She was shaking. I said, I came here because Dad wouldn't. Not because he doesn't care. Because caring about you has cost him too much already. He gave you everything a son could give. Loyalty. Patience. Money. And you gave it all to Garrett. Every time. She said, I know. I said, Garrett hasn't called in 11 months. Dad has paid $50,400. She said, I know that too. I said, then you know who your son is. Not the one you chose. The one who chose you anyway. I left. Drove home. Pulled into the driveway of the mansion. 4,200 square feet. Stone columns. Harold's porch. Dad was in the kitchen. Making dinner. Pasta. Wednesday is pasta night. He said, how was it? I said, she's old. She's sorry. She still doesn't know if she'd have chosen differently. He said, I know. I said, you're a better man than she deserved. He said, Harold raised me. Not her. Everything good in me is his. He went back to stirring the sauce. I sat at the marble island. Harold's island. In Harold's house. The house Vivian lost. The house Dad bought. The house I grew up in. Somewhere across town, an 80-year-old woman is staring at a parking lot through a window she can't open, wondering if the son she threw away will ever forgive her. He won't. But he'll keep paying. Because that's what Harold would do. And the only parent my father ever had was the man who built this house. Not the woman who lost it.